Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Cheng from CME Group, and here's a little presentation, Chef and Chocolatey, sweet recipes. So kind of going over, the agenda is who is CME Group, where do I fit in, a little bit of history of where we started, how we changed, and what we chose. Next will be essentially how Chocolatey and Chef will work together in the face of even some challenges that we faced. And then what's coming down the pipe in the future? Obligatory disclaimer, if you really feel so inclined, you're welcome to read it later. So CME Group. What does CME Group do? So essentially, we handle 3 billion contracts annually. And that equals about $1 quadrillion, a little chump change here and there. So what does a contract? Well, have you guys seen movies where you're like, hey, I'd like to buy futures on pork bellies or wheat? That's us. More than likely, people are coming to us to handle those contracts. So where people hedge their risks. And when you think of people doing the weird gestures on their heads, saying, I'd like to, screaming in the pit, we got some of that. But for us at CME, we've transitioned to a very technology-focused company. There's a lot of electronic trading going on these days. And for us, the measurement of success is often measured in microseconds. So we look at this and say, we need to find technologies that help to enable us to run very securely, as well as very, very regularly and not have to have any interruptions, manual configurations, and kind of what the guys at Yelp had mentioned, inconsistent configurations are a problem. So where I fit in, kind of background for where I came from, had some database administration experience. I was certified in SQL 2000, long ago. I'll have to wipe the dust off that every so often, but I do have some experience as well in storage architecture. My first Cisco cert was in the fiber channel switching area. And went on to virtualization back when VMware GSX 1.0 was the cool hotness, way long ago. Did Windows engineering since Windows NT 4.0. I would say I did dabble a little bit in 3.1.1, but I wouldn't count that as professional. But it followed that all the way along to Windows 2016, 2019, and all the iterations in between. Did application deployment and development. So from a development perspective, dare I say I'd done things from all the way from assembler to CGI, all the way to more modern technologies such as C# and things in between, such as Java and C++. And then looking at things like deployment. So I've done different technologies. Alteryx is an example, SCCM, moving along to other technologies such as Chef. And then automation. Of course, you can't do any of this without automation. So I've done my share of really hackish shell scripts. I've also moved along to VB script. Yes, insanely long, non-object-oriented VB scripts. But then the benefits of PowerShell. I've leveraged PowerShell to do a lot of the automation on the Windows platform that are necessary to help effectuate success. And then architecture, to kind of blend all these perspectives together and help to analyze processes, redefine how things are done, to help make the next level more productive and take in all the inputs of my previous experiences into that. Education. So, I kind of got my experiences with computer science in the first round in a bachelor's, and then another bachelor's in psychology. So I guess that makes me a computer analyst. Looking at the graduate level, I got my MBA, followed up with an MS in MIS, and 3 grad certificates in leadership, finance, and MIS. So where does that take me to? It took me to CME back in 2013. Started off as a technical specialist, moved on to managing a very talented pool of Windows engineers that helped to reinforce the Windows Server platform, and then transitioned over to an application deployment role that helped to facilitate the onboarding of applications into production. So anything from, hey, how do I do this from a database perspective, to what would be the appropriate flow for doing promotion processes, and also working to help triage and firefight just as well. So where were we? So looking at the landscape when I first joined CME, there was a lot of custom-written software. Now, custom-written software is great for trading engines and doing things that are your core competencies. We were so talented that we even wrote our own inventory scripts for everything in the environment. And we also leveraged a lot of proprietary technology. So there were some scripting technologies that were just slightly proprietary, to so much that you couldn't move off that platform. We also had lots of physical servers. So I get it. VMs run on physical servers. I'm not here to say that nothing runs on physical servers. But we had a lot of physical servers and almost no virtualization. Hardware deployments were also very isolated between the various arms of the operating system platforms. We had a Linux platform team and a Windows platform team. They wrote their own deployment system. We kind of used an outdated, no longer supported tool. And then inconsistent hardware platforms. So one team would leverage pizza boxes, one use of a particular vendor. The Windows side would use a different chipset, different manufacturer like AMD versus Intel, use blades. So there was kind of a mismatch. I couldn't just go over to the other side and say, hey, can we just take one of your boxes real quick and just throw our image on it? Because unfortunately, our drivers weren't installed on it. Then automation. Back then, the majority of the automation was GUI based. So yes, it kind of is almost an oxymoron where you have to click a radial button, make a few selects on a few boxes to say, okay, now kick this off as a sequence of tasks. But there were some pockets of automation. There was VB-script out there, and there was this proprietary scripting technology that was used. But then, taking a look at this lay of the land and thinking, okay, well, we need to analyze the processes. So kind of drawing on that, the MBA background, going, well, why do we even bother? Why bother? Because technology enables processes. So if you have a good process, it's going to be accelerated by technology. But guess what? If you have a horrible, wretched process, it'll be that much faster with technology too. So you got to think about what you're doing. And are we aiming for the right target? Kind of feeds right into that. I mean, what is the business driver? Kind of what I alluded to earlier. We had custom inventory scripts and software solutions that we hand wrote. But is that a core competency? Could there possibly be other vendors that their core competency is inventory software? That's the type of things you need to analyze when you look at your overall landscape. What is your core competency? What do you do right now? And do you still need to be doing it? And then why do we do what we do today? In other words, how do we get here? Often things grow organically. So you start with function A, hey, we need to grow to function B. You kind of bolt onto that, and you've got your process. Analyze how we got there, and then determine, what do we need to do with that? And then what are there opportunities to improve? Manual processes. Anything where you swivel chair from one GUI to another just to do data entry that's exactly the same out of one and into another. Perfect examples. That's what I mean by GUIs count. And then proprietary technologies. So anything that requires you to do a custom scripting language. I know I've kind of beat that one a few times, but it's important. Look at what you have from a proprietary technology perspective and determine what its use for is in your environment. Then bring about a culture of change. Obviously, you'll need management buy-in. If you're not in lockstep with your boss, you're probably not going to continue on the path very well. But the corollary to that is you also need to learn to fail. What do I mean by fail? You need to learn to fail fast. Know what your exit plan is, articulate that strategy, make sure your management's on board, and move forward. And then expanding the knowledge. You need to identify the gaps and provide training. So if you're the only guy that knows PowerShell in the group, or you're the only guy that knows C# in the group, you're going to be that single point of failure. You don't want to be there. What I always told the guys that work with me was, I can't grow if you don't grow. So my job is to make sure all of you grow so that I can grow. Identify those gaps such as a lack of PowerShell knowledge or a lack of automation knowledge, and provide those opportunities through training, through the ability to provide tasks that exercise those training skills. I mean, obviously you got trained. It's not going to help if you never do anything with it and let those atrophy. And then challenge your assumptions. I mean, just because we have ... doesn't mean we should. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that, and I think to myself, well, let's challenge those assumptions. And people just get offended by that. It's emotional responses there. We need to step away from those emotional responses. Yes, people get vested in the technologies they help to deploy, but it's also important to reassess. And then set a vision. I mean, you got to know where you're going. If you're just kind of looking down and then moving along in one direction, never looking up, you may wind up being way off target than where you intended to be. Get that vision and make sure you evangelize that vision. So it's not just in your head and not just in the person next to you, but everyone around you knows where we're trying to go. And get them excited about it. So Chef represented a very unique opportunity in our environment. Configuration management was varied between different operating systems. Once again, different silos. They implemented their own versions, custom written software or proprietary technologies, and different deployment technologies, kind of different hardware platforms, and going to different development teams having their own way of deploying software. So one software would use, hey, let's use a command shell. Let's use right-click copy, right-click paste for this deployment. And then another one would actually use some PowerShell, but it was very inconsistent. So this offered us the opportunity to have one tool to rule them all. And what does that buy us? Buys us configuration as code. I mean, come on. Who wants to continue to use radio buttons for deployment or look at some really junky command batch script? You want to look at a script that has been peer-reviewed. You want to be able to spread that knowledge across multiple teams. So when people say, well, how did application deployment team deploy that? You know, for app XYZ, app 123 can just look at their commits. Hey, these were merged in, and they actually ran in production just fine. We should probably mimic some of that. It also provides code reusability as well. And then testing pipelines. I mean, we want to get away from manual QA. Who wants to go through and click, click, click to find out about whether or not their deployment was successful? That's definitely the wrong direction. So this allowed us to do things such as Test Kitchen and other automation frameworks that provide us the ability to QA things in a repeatable fashion. Chocolatey. Now, Chocolatey provides a really great layer on top of this. So who here loves action scripts? Raise your hand. Awesome, I love those 1603 errors too. So, that being said, every package seems to do what's right in their own eyes. And the challenge with that is, for example, these custom actions, once you hit that, it's the black hole. It's not like anyone could actually uninstall those things. So you actually had to go in and uninstall it by removing those registry entries that they hacksorted their way in, or removing those files that just got left behind because you uninstalled it, but the action script dropped some extra files in there. Licensing files typically are the culprit there. And then installation logic standardization. So with installation logic, we allow the abstraction layer. So that way, Chef cookbooks can be consistent across the board. You're just calling a single Chocolatey resource to do the install. And all that complexity between vendor A MSI provider, setup.exe, all those different things are abstracted away. And then leveraging the Chocolatey for Business functions allowed us to quickly ramp on new installers quickly by just doing like a Choco new -- file and input in. You get the framework for what you need. The majority of what you have to do is already done for you. And then incorporating consistency in installation patterns. Deferring to what I said earlier, I don't want to have to code all that custom MSI logic and setup installation functionality into each and every cookbook that I have to deploy an application for. Abstract it away, make a simple Chef resource call. And no agents are required. With an environment such as ours, it's really important to have a lightweight footprint. We already have enough that we have to deal with from a security perspective, and don't get me wrong, anyone who's security focused, it's important. Today's society is very security-centric, and it should be. And for those who don't think we need it, I defer back to my previous comments. So something that doesn't have an agent will help us be more efficient. And then open source. Come on, who wants to use proprietary stuff? When you've got an open source community feeding in inputs with an aggregate of different development streams that provide a much better, richer ecosystem rather than some small little business unit in a company that may get user input. And then Chef and Chocolatey together. They offered a great cross-company collaboration. So why do I say that? Well, when we started off, there was a POC between us and Chocolatey to evaluate the technology. The one thing I found was, oddly enough, there was an issue trying to do chef convergence on Chocolatey resources. So we reached out to Rob and team, and they were really Johnny on the spot, grabbed Matt Rocks from Chef, collaborated like crazy. Instead of the typical, someone calls, hey, can we get help on this? And then they say, call the other vendor. And you know what that means. It's a vendor Macarena. None of that was present here. They collaborated really well, kept me in the loop, and was able to solve the problem, and even gave me the PR for the solution for the problem. Simplification through abstraction. I've kind of mentioned a few times already about how I'd like to have a consistent template for deploying applications in Chef, and that abstraction that Chocolatey offers to just be able to call that resource, perfect. And then centralized repository for common artifacts. A responsibility for our team is to be able to take the platforms that are used by all the different production applications like Jerry, Tomcat, standardize it and put it in a repository so that way it's a consistent deployment each and every time. It's not like you're doing a C:/Jerry, blah, 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 one installation, another one goes to C program files. It's the same directory every time, same logging each and every time. So what's next? Well, our goal is we'd like to automate package creation. So reduce the need to repackage a new version of the same software. Now, it's definitely in our roadmap. Another thing is to upgrade non-OS software seamlessly. We want to be able to go, just like you do with Windows patches, go through and say, all right, and at the tail end of this patching process for this month, we're also going to update anyone that happens to have Jerry installed, Tomcat installed, XYZ app installed. Do that as part of the patching process and do it and that way they can check out as part of the QA process at the end of the patching cycle. And then evaluate OS patching technologies. Avoiding any heavy footprints. The heavier the footprint, the more cumbersome it can be, and the more you have a reliance on on-prem technologies, or at least a large footprint out in the cloud as well. Anything lighter weight is much better. And one thing I always like to do is challenge your assumptions anyways. If you're still using the same technology 3 years later, you should at least have thought to yourself, do I still need to be using this? Is there a competitor that makes it better? So with that being said, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.